Hello there. It appears we have a wave of right-wing victories in elections. Latest one from Austria, when the Austrian FPO party celebrated a massive first-place finish in regional elections after results came in. The FPO was locked out of the federal government despite a first-place finish earlier this year. This is sweet revenge from the party, that is, from Remix News. Now, despite the fact that they seem to be doing well, they also seem to be in legal trouble. So this is the Romanian court annulling the result of the presidential election in Romania after a right-wing candidate appeared to be winning. And this isn't an isolated incident. Of course, Trump had certain allegations made against him that turned out to be bogus, as far as I could tell. Pretty much all of them were dropped. Not all, but almost all of them were dropped. Essentially, there was very much political prosecution against him. Now, this is Orban enumerating so many world leaders on the right that have been in the same boat. Marine Le Pen, Kickel is the guy from Austria, the leader of the FPO, Matteo Salvini. There's been quite a few. So let's listen to him for a moment, and then we'll talk about how democracy functions today.
They cannot accept the idea of us coming back to power. It's only a democracy if they win. And everything is justified to stop us if we seem to win. They weaponize the law and the courts against us. This is what they did with Trump across the Atlantic, and this is what they have done to our friend Matteo Salvini, and this is what they are trying to do against our wonderful host, Marine Le Pen. And by the latest news, what exactly they try to do against Herbert Kickl, the head of the FPÖ. We have to give a common answer. This is the first lesson we can draw from the American election. And this is my second point, that the election in America showed clearly that we can still win under these extremely difficult circumstances. And not just win by a small margin, but we can achieve historic and monumental victory. And the reason for this brings me to my third point. We can win because the left is completely incapable of governing.
I actually agree with him. If you look at the way things are going in California and New York, the more rich, posh neighborhoods might be fine. Everywhere else is really not. You have human excrement on the streets, you have tent cities, you have homeless people, you have needles, skyrocketing amounts of crime, shoplifting, food deserts as a result. Things are not going well. And fiscally also, they are not fiscally responsible and they find themselves in debt, the local government. So if you talk about school achievements, you have entire schools where basically no one can do basic math or reading in poor neighborhoods. It's really a shame. They are absolutely not providing good governance, and the result is a terrible amount of human suffering. So how do they still cling to power? Well, they censor anyone who criticizes them and anyone who tries to bring up an alternative, and when that alternative becomes very popular anyway and gains popular support from the people, then you ban them or you try and create some sort of legal trouble to get them stuck in court so that they are either not eligible or too busy defending from allegations to actually put across their point. And do you see that they do the same thing with all right-wing leaders across the entire world? It's not anything special to one right-wing leader, and you will find that the same accusations could be leveled against the left or worse. Kamala Harris right now is embroiled in a very interesting controversy about campaign finances. And what Herbert Kickl is accused of is, I believe, using the government funds to advertise for his party in the elections or something of the sort. Such accusations could be made very credibly, I believe, against many left-wing media organizations, against many left-wing candidates. That we have seen so many times that large social media platforms ban all news and even iconic photos like for example, the one from when Trump was almost assassinated. They ban these. Their AI also pretends it never happened, and also their AI can't give you an answer for why to vote for Donald Trump, but can definitely give you an answer for why vote for Kamala Harris. In the same way, the AI will not criticize Kamala Harris, but it will criticize Donald Trump. Is that not a campaign violation if you essentially, as a large media organization, broadly support one candidate against the other? Isn't it the same as if you give them a donation in terms of advertising? In my opinion, it is. I think it could be argued, but there's nothing that can be done in the current political and legal atmosphere against left-wing parties and individuals because they have too much political power and it will not stick. That's my personal take. So I do not believe that these accusations are fair in the sense that whether or not there's anything there, I don't know because I haven't heard much about, let's say, Herbert Kickle or Marine Le Pen's dealings specifically. But whether or not there is anything there, the nature of the accusations is such that I have seen quite a bit of info on similar things on the left that has essentially just been normalized. I absolutely believe that this is political persecution, and this is essentially their way to push back this sort of how do I put it? Pushback. Essentially, you have this metronome going from side to side, and if it goes too far on one side, then it will, with great vehemence, swing to the other side. And this social metronome currently is pointing far left and has been for a while now. It's itching to move to the right, and the left will not allow it because they are afraid of the consequences of their actions being brought to them, but also because I believe they truly have hope that if they can just hold on long enough, then they will never have to face the consequences, because they will be able to create a perpetual one-party rule worldwide. I think this is the raison d'etre, the reason for living, the one dream and goal for everything they do. Essentially, you have the attempt to normalize the social credit score system like in China through things like CBDCs and digital IDs. And they believe that if they can just bring that to pass, then you will be utterly helpless before the might of the government, and they will never be held accountable. If they can't do it, and they are ousted, they are afraid, and you can see them talk a lot about how afraid they are of, let's say, the Trump administration persecuting them for the crimes that they've committed. They're afraid that everything they've done to try and prevent the opposition from taking power and instating populism, which is to say the will of the population, of the populace, of the citizens, as should be. Firstly, if you look at studies made in America about what becomes law and what doesn't, you'll find that if only the rich want something to happen, then it will happen. It will be passed into law. If the overwhelming majority want something to happen, but the rich are against it, it will not pass into law. That's what research into the US, like last 30 years, has shown. So they are afraid that the rule will return to the people, and they will be held accountable for everything they've done. And it will not be a small reckoning either. There is going to be a lot turning up, in my personal opinion, about the grievances that they've accumulated. There's a lot of talk from people on the right about what happens to children across the border of the United States, you know. A lot of children, the right claims are, well, the fate is unknown, and the presumption that human traffickers have them. And if that turns out to be true, well, I think a very severe punishment should obviously be meted out. There's also, of course, the problems that crop up every time you increase the population of a certain place by a great deal in a very short amount of time. Suddenly there's not enough houses, social services, it becomes unsafe to walk outside, the sort of entire atmosphere of the place changes, and suddenly what used to be the norms and morals of the place, the culture, is now considered stifling and evil, and instead you're expected to change to respect the culture of the people who just came in instead, as if somehow you owe it to them, like some sort of reparations. I think you'll find that people are very angry, and the only thing that's stopping this from becoming a worldwide phenomenon that sweeps across all governments pretty much is the amount of censorship and government forced tyranny that is at least threatening to come down on people. And it is coming down on some people. Like in Germany, I just read today about a 14-year-old that used the hashtag everything for Germany, which I believe supposedly was a thing from the 1930s Germans, but also like an AfD party member, I believe, said it. Anyway, so the police raided the house of this 14-year-old boy and like confiscated electronics and made copies of all the documents. It's like, what documents? It's a 14-year-old boy. They basically turned his room upside down, and his brothers, and investigated his teenage brother as well. It's like, you're going to send an entire police raid on a teenager. Well, meanwhile, you have so many more serious crimes that basically nothing is done about them. Why? Because it's safe to attack a 14-year-old boy. It's not safe to go into a migrant no-go zone and investigate the serious crimes that the people there are accused of. And I'm not saying this to demonize migrants. I am saying this to point out that statistically, by the government's admission, they are responsible for an overwhelmingly large percentage of the crime compared to their percentage in the population, which means that there's a problem that should be addressed. And B, because they are the ones that get away with it, because essentially the police is too scared to go in there for fear of what the entire population would do to them, basically. For fear that, a mob will set on them. So what you have there is a cultural problem that is being blown out of proportion by lack of courage and funding on the part of the police and the government. If the government was determined to see justice done for everyone, they would fund and back politically and socially the police to go into places with high rates of crime, even if it's migrants there, instead of being afraid of being seen as racist. And they would do something about it, but they don't, because it's the left-wing government, and this is just one more grievance that the public has with left-wing governments, and right-wing governments are preying upon these, perhaps preying as a negative connotations, but they are utilizing these feelings of left-wing governments to bolster support in them, and essentially promising, we will right the wrongs done to you, we'll give you justice. And that is the most fundamental and basic function of a government. And the left is, obviously no government is truly just, but the left is so egregiously unjust that it's so easy for the right to score points this way. And every time they try and censor and ban and push back right-wing candidates on false charges or with some sort of political machinations like they did in France to Le Pen, where basically they bound together all the left-wing parties and use the dirty trick where basically they all send the one candidate from all of them together to compete against the candidate on the right from Marine Le Pen, so that she has less seats than she would if everybody just competed fairly according to the rules of elections in France. So the longer you keep this going, the more grievances that you will accrue, and as a result, the greater the pushback once it finally coalesces into a right-wing government, as it did in the United States, and as it will pretty much everywhere else, except maybe Britain, which somehow, some way, the populace still there is horrifically left-wing. I saw a Lodosita video recently where basically they enumerated the ideologies that the public favors least to most, and the overwhelming majority of the public, like over 85%, I think, 86%, favored environmentalism the most, and second was feminism. And it's just so sad, because environmentalism might have meant something good once when people were talking about gas spills in the oceans, like toxic chemicals in the food, plastics and heavy metals, things like that actually mattered, air pollution. Instead, now they're very, very correct on climate change, which is all I can see on YouTube. But yeah, I don't understand how can anyone still support environmentalism as it is today. And then, of course, there is feminism, which once again might have been very correct, back when women didn't have the right to own property or work, run a business. But nowadays, they have had these rights for a very long while. And in fact, they are the majority of university students still have a bonus, special DEI programs to give them advantages when getting into college, despite the fact that they are most of the people getting into college, and even more of them graduate from college compared to men, because college is hostile to men now. We don't see egalitarianism where basically we say, okay, that's it, we have more than made up for the lack of support for women in academia. Now we have an overwhelming majority of women in academia. It's time, you know what, don't give men a bonus, don't give men some sort of preferential treatment to try and balance things. Just remove all of the DEI programs. Be egalitarian, treat everyone equally. Not equality of results, outcomes, not equity, just have equality under the law. Everyone is treated the same. We can't have that. That would be racist and sexist. Okay, keep going. We'll see what kind of government you get. We keep saying that he is going to vote for the most far-right candidate because the left is making his life miserable and he wants to return the favor. And you know what? This is going to be a mentality that more and more people adopt, as they simply have no good options. If you do not agree with the current government, let's say in Britain, then what good options do you have? If you do not agree with the current government in Germany and AfD gets banned, what options do you have? You can vote for the status quo or not vote at all. Okay? See how far that gets you. Still, we shouldn't be black-pilled, we shouldn't be too mournful right now. We have had a very big victory for populism, for essentially return to, let's say, normalcy of like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, essentially. We have had a bunch of like 80s Democrats win the US elections in the name of the right wing. And we are seeing big gains for right-wing parties across Europe. We just need, as our friend Orban said, we just need to keep going. We saw that we can be too big to rig. We can overcome all of their attempts to destroy us through underhanded means and ensure that we stop this madness that they're spreading. Because I can't find any other name for it, honestly. Every time I see, oh look, another giant fail from Disney or some other gigantic corporations, Bud Light or whatever, costing you stupid amounts of money. And for what? Trying to socially engineer society? This is insane. This is honestly so crazy. And this accumulates grievance at such a rapid pace. It used to be much, much slower. These movements used to take forever to accumulate any sort of following, and nowadays it's just normalized. It's like normal part of society being anti-woke. And I don't think people truly hate the idea of left-wing ideals. If you told someone, look, we're going to have a government that takes care of people, right? Yeah, you'll have slightly higher taxes, but in return, the government will take care of people who come into hard times in order to reduce poverty and therefore reduce crime and make sure you have a social safety net. I think people, if that was the left today, as it used to be, people would have been much more tolerant of it, and in fact, there'd be quite a few supporting it. Instead, they go, no, you don't understand. We've got to have drag queen people, like grown men pretending to be women, reading stories to 4-year-olds. Okay, see how far that gets you. I honestly don't want to see the logical conclusion of that ideology, because I truly fear that it would be stiff competition for the 1930s Germans, or perhaps even for the Chinese during Mao's era. I do believe they hold the world record for most people ended in the shortest period of time. But that's as far as this goes from me. Thanks for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.